Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. Welcome to the Fulfillment Files, a podcast run by the Association of Supply Chain Management at UT Dallas. My name is Saad Khwaja. I am no longer president of the association. However, I do sit on the board of directors for ASCM North Texas. Today, we have an amazing guest, Mr. Mohannad Gomaa. We'll be going over supply chain consulting, the ins and outs of supply chain consulting, as well as building your personal brand and the value of networking. From a consulting standpoint, that second part is very important. But as you know, we haven't heard the supply chain perspective from a consultant yet. So I'm really excited to have somebody as experienced as Mr. Gomaa here to tell us about supply chain consulting. He has an incredible background. I can't wait to get into it. Welcome, Mr. Gomaa.
Thank you so much, Ad, for the opportunity, and great to meet you again. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully I can be of value to you and your community. Looking forward to it for sure.
Awesome. So to get started, I would love to run through education is where you have worked, what you have done, and what you kind of occupy yourself with today.
Awesome. I'm mainly focused on supply chain consulting track, and my background, I got a bachelor degrees in mechanical industrial engineering from the American University in Cairo. I got my first master's in engineering management from George Washington University and my MBA from University of Maryland Smith School of Business and MA from MIT Sloan in supply chain as well. Been in supply chain consulting for about 24 years, mainly focused on supply chain strategy and supply chain planning and transformation on the digital side, on the process side, and on the strategy side, mainly helping companies, help them with the journey, transformation journey. Me and team go through that. Experience has been, I started in the industry, working in the cement industry with Cemex, and then from there, I got lost in the world of consulting. I started in government consulting, working with Booz Allen Hamilton, and then I moved to Accenture, and then Ernest Young and Infosys Consulting, and then I opened my own practice.
Yeah, what was interesting about your background is you started as an engineer, which isn't atypical, but the jump into consulting was pretty quick after that. And then you also worked across major consulting companies, including a big four. So your perspective is really fascinating. I wanted to know, starting as an industrial engineer, what initially drew you into the supply chain field, and why has this become the center of your entire career?
Yeah. I mean, in my scenario, it was a function of one, I'm an industrial engineer. So when I was an industrial engineer, they didn't really teach us the concept supply chain wasn't there, but the skills, the material that we were educated on definitely had all the elements in there. So it was definitely driven by my background in engineering. And then working in the industry and the field where I came in was very interesting and pretty much shaped my goal to look into consulting, which was mainly, I joined during the post-merger integration for Fortune 500. And during that phase, I got to do more than just an engineer, and I got to work across functions, organization functions, whether it's finance, whether it's marketing, whether it's HR even. It was all about how you really run a lot of those initiatives and they're all project based and they're all tied to specific metrics and deliverables. That line of work really shaped in terms of how I can progress my career. It was a function of being in the right place. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. So as you know, consulting is our bread and butter and not as much manufacturing here. So at that time, I was the board of directors in the Institute of Industrial Engineers, IIE. And through that network is what got me to get into consulting, leveraging my engineering background. That was the driver for me to get into consulting, specifically my background and opportunities and all of that.
Yeah. Wow. And kind of along with your engineering background, your MBA, the executive education, all the consulting experience, you're also certified in many different practices. You're a PMI certified project management professional, PMP. You have a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and you're Apex certified, CSCP. And you're also an ASCM authorized training partner for the Apex certifications, which is great. So I wanted to know, how have these additional credentials impact your approach to consulting, And is there any one type of certification or discipline that you tend to lean on more?
Yeah, all of them definitely were paid driven. As much as I love education, as a consultant, you definitely need a lot of elements. So the PMP helped me in a lot of ways. As a consultant, managing projects day in and day out, understanding the framework is very important to apply it for sure. So when you work in government contract or any other, to adapt the PMI language and framework, you have to relate to that. For me, that was the driver to do that more than anything else. I leveraged that experience when I was developing a project for a specific client that wanted to create a PMO structure for a mega project, actually. So how you bring in credible, again, framework to apply it was very important. That's how PMP definitely helped me. In Six Sigma, I'm also a licensed engineer. I did that as part of my growth and really strengthening my core and credentialize myself after many years not being an engineer. I really wanted to make sure that I master some of the aspects of the quality and efficiency that goes into manufacturing or in any other operations. It definitely brought a lot of knowledge or updated knowledge that I wanted to do beside the credentials, of course. CSP was a must for me as a consultant. I learned you need to align the business strategy with the operation strategy in order to really strengthen your initiatives and goals and align it to the business. This is one of the key things we learned. For me, it was the breadth of the knowledge that I used in throughout my project in terms of bringing the understanding between the strategy part, the planning part, and then how you do that, how you really align this with all the other supply chain elements, whether it's logistics, inventory, manufacturing, of course, procurement. All of that definitely helped me to understand on a deep level the connections between the processes, the systems. That was key for me. So that's what really CSCP brought to me as a consultant.
I noticed even when I was doing my own work in the defense industry, they had a lot of people doing PMP, but they also have their own project management certification. It's very heavily rooted in the PMP. Love to say to do Lean Six Sigma, but I don't know if they're that great because it's such a rigid and structured environment, and you have low product volume, high cost. They need that kind of structure to govern their business practices. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've heard a lot of, especially the defense side of things, where things are very tight. So it's interesting to see that.
I mean, even if companies wouldn't want to call some of their or align their initiatives to Lean Six Sigma concept or say they adopt it, but the knowledge base is what's important. I mean, you see them even in job descriptions and proposals. Do you understand the basics of Lean Six Sigma? Because that's really what they're after more than anything else. It's not the label as much as the knowledge.
Sure. I want to dive into supply chain consulting here. Over these interviews that I've done, I tend to meet two types of people. They either have worked in the industry their whole life and then they start a consultancy towards their end, or they do start consulting in the middle or relatively early in their career. They tend to share the same opinion. Starting your career as a consultant, you'll face significant challenges in two ways. One, if you start as a consultant and you jump into the industry, you don't have that depth of knowledge. You need to perform that function really well. I mean, you'll face some challenges transitioning out of consulting. So it's best not to start as a consultant. But you're one of the first people that I'm interviewing who's been a career supply chain consultant, where you very early on started and stuck with consulting, and now you run your own consulting firm. So I wanted to know how you would challenge that assertion. Being a supply chain consultant who has consulted at least 6 different industries, which we'll go over across 3 different continents, how has that shaped your perspectives on supply chain compared to those who rise to supply chain leadership from the functional areas?
Yeah. In my scenario, she started industry not that long, but moving geographically from Egypt to the US was one of them, and pursuing my master's got me to leave an employer and look for another one. So it was driven by my own personal circumstance. To your point, it's always interesting to see who comes directly into consulting versus the industry. because when you come in the industry, you can relate to the everyday problems, the connections, dynamic, everything. If you're a consultant, you might not relate to this from a governance perspective, from how you deal with people, from understanding really the intricacies of the client in terms of where is the problem. So you have to learn that. But again, it's a really good question, because whether you come from industry or definitely in consulting, both facets definitely bring value. They're different. Then I'm a strong advocate of starting from the industry for sure. But when you get into consulting directly, you learn quickly. You structure your thinking, how to solve problems in unfamiliar environment. There's no way anybody is gonna let you fake it. You have to definitely absorb the knowledge from your clients, from your team leads. You usually, depending on where you work, you definitely get into college. I work at Accenture, and they taught me supply chain. They got me exposure to different supply chains, from USPS to NHS, others. We definitely learn from the team and the type of project. Every project is different. Every approach is different. Assessments are the same, but depending on the industry, depending on how mature the company is, you definitely learn something every day. So aligning yourself into an industry vertical is very important. If you're coming from the industry, and depending how many years of experience you bring to the table, can definitely get you into different track, a subject matter expert track, because you know the industry well. But then you get a different view when you join consulting without industry experience. I work in CPG, or I get to see from a different lens how problems are perceived, dealt with across industry. So you match patterns, you cross-pollinate ideas, you challenge the status quo in a lot of ways. It's the breadth and versatility of a consultant that builds great experience that you can carry it across your project, and you continuously learn. So whether you come again from the industry or consulting, you start in consulting, there's advantage and disadvantage. But when you get into consulting, it's not like you're coming and going, you're not going to the client and tell them, I've seen this 100 times and I can tell you exactly what to do. So not true. I mean, you learn to structure how you analyze problems, data. You learn how to manage projects for sure. You learn how to learn from people, how to work in a team environment, how you apply your soft skills, but then definitely your hard skills based on your subject matter in terms of how you analyze those problems and how to solve them in a specific, methodology. So you learn this stuff in consulting college. And if you get into consulting, you definitely get a lot of experience that then gets you to later align to a different industry. It's definitely a path that you function of opportunity, function of what you really after. If you want to own a process versus you want to see different ones. So when you get in consulting, moving from an industry, from an operation type environment to a project-based type environment is also there. It's not for everybody. So how you adapt to that is very important and brings a different skill set in terms of how you manage your day-to-day. How do you be, like we say, fungible in terms of bring to the table to the client environment.
Yeah. So as a quick recap, you've consulted at CGI, the leading IT consulting firm founded in 1976. I think they do 11 billion in revenue now, which is amazing. You've consulted at Accenture, a professional services and management consulting company. Booz Allen Hamilton, it's a management consulting firm that does a lot of government contracts, but also does commercial, very, very large, also 12 billion in revenue. Ernst & Young, known as one of the big four professional services company. You've consulted at Cognizant, which is a multinational IT consulting and outsourcing company, and Infosys, an Indian-based multinational technology company. So you've been working at a lot of these different consulting firms. I wanted to take some time to compare these different companies in terms of their consulting approach. What were the major differences between their attitudes and strategies or approaches to consulting?
Yeah, every firm has its own DNA, right? I saw a lot of differences in Accenture, and I used to work in Accenture strategy as well, which is equivalent to McKinsey's, the BCG, Bain. So they definitely very highly structured, rigorous. They definitely emphasize working across function transformation, and they train you well. and they invest in long-term thinking as well. You know, I'm lucky to have worked globally with them. So it's truly a global consulting firm, one of very few that they can call themselves global. So I think from Latin America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia, I pretty much worked with people across the globe on projects across those geographies as well. So they bring different strategies, different way of executing as well. Booz Allen is also a great company. They're definitely deep in government. I joined actually in a very interesting phase of Booz Allen where they were splitting the commercial from the government. And I was there when they rejoined again. The system thinking, the analytical models that they bring, the entrepreneurial aspect of it. I was one of 11 who moved from McLean, Virginia to Abu Dhabi to set up the first international office. So how the entrepreneurship that they taught us into how to bring those capabilities to market was very interesting. And that's also across all climate accounts. So they definitely have a different culture and strategy different than others as well. Ernest& Young, it's a very progressive consulting. I learned a lot from EY. A lot of my M&A integration work that I do now, came from EY. How do you really combine the business transformation with the operation transformation with technology was very interesting. There's definitely an element of financials as well, aligned to operation that I also learned. But a lot of the M&A integration work that I do comes from that experience, from that and from Accenture. Infosys and Cognizant was very interesting because they're more technology, enabled transformation kind of organization. So they go for sure. So how you combine tech and process consulting together is very interesting. Now working on my own and so my company, these are all lessons learned and great experience that I cherish, and I owe it to everybody who invested me time and gave me the opportunity to get on projects in there to create my own DNA. Maybe I didn't do in direction, but what I do in my company now, it's a mix of M&A, mainly focused on supply chain integrations during the post-merger integration, or even in the beginning on the operation due diligence. And I'm taking different verticals as well, from deal structuring, sourcing, and all that, which is very interesting. So they definitely lay the bricks on there and allow me to redesign my own offerings and my own DNA as I go. I still do consulting. I still do supply chain consulting for private equities, chemicals, CPG clients, pharma clients, medtech. That definitely came from my experience from all of these firms that allow me to dig deep across industries and not shy away from taking that leap or understanding what the industry is about and how the supply chain is different. When we used to start in a client, a new client environment, a new industry, there were always briefing. There was always, what is this? What's unique about the supply chain? What's unique about their forecasting? What's unique about their distribution? So I learned a lot from those companies in terms of how they structure, how they go to market, how entrepreneurial they are, how they put offerings as well. It's very interesting.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of the industries you covered, they are IT, the information technology, aerospace and defense, energy, CPG or retail, food and beverage, and of course, healthcare, life sciences, and pharmaceutical medtech. Have you noticed differences in what executive leadership at those different companies prioritize and protect when you compare their operating models?
Yeah. And even within industries, every company is different. If I would start with pharma, for example, pharma supply chain is their priorities and their performance attributes are very different. They focus on resilience. And in the same time, they have all those compliances and continuity that's are not negotiable. So how do you maintain that resilience? How do you, every process that you put together, how you make sure that they're complied with regulations? And they have long lead time. So they focus on inventory, buffers, quality audit, all of that. And CPG and retail, which is one of my favorite in a lot of ways because of the speed and the margins. Within supply chain, you can think of how important it is to focus on forecast accuracy. Forecast accuracy is everything. It's tied to the top line. Okay. Tied to how you allocate your assortment across market stores and so forth, how you focus on fill rate, promotion execution that drives everything. Executives are always upset about agility, cost to serve, segmentation, and how each supply chain has its own attributes that we need to focus on to grow it. So that's one of the key things about TPG. Energy or oil and gas. This supply chain is mainly focused on asset utilization and capability disciplines. Those projects are long-term, capital intensive, as you can imagine. Decision making is very structured. We were implementing it when they were one of the chemical clients, when they were looking into $180 million investment in technology. It's not just go do it type thing. You definitely have to develop a business case. You have to quantify all the benefits. You have to quantify all the costs, see what ROI, all of that. There's a team that checks what CGU and align it with all supply chain needs as well. So they're really focused on asset utilization, whether the asset is a physical asset or a technology asset. So that's the difference. Aerospace is all about security, availability. It's all about contractual service levels. It's about cost, but not always about cost as well, right? It's about how readiness is important. So supply chain has different attributes that works with multiple suppliers. The end customer, whether it's airline or GD or whatever the case is, are really interested to see how they can collaborate across their supply chain. How can they really work with their suppliers to move from the traditional aspect of contracting into performance-based type of contract, like PBL, for example. So that's one of the attributes of this industry and the operator model that makes them interesting.
That reminds me of a story. I had spoken to somebody when I was doing my work over at Northrop. He was somebody who had spent almost 25 years working at the Pentagon. And then he came over and started doing business development. And I asked him what changed, what was the difference? He was like, they care so much about shareholders. At the Pentagon, we will not spare any money. If we need money to make something happen, it'll just go through. There's no, it's going to cost too much, nothing like that. But when you're working in the private industry, all of your decisions are tied to the performance of your suppliers and to the performance of your stock. It's an entirely different mindset. He wasn't used to dealing with cost. It really will not spare any expense because it's national security.
Yeah. Stock is a concern. It's the priority in any industry. How they spend is different for sure. The priority and the mission is different. You have also commercial clients across the industry. Yes, of course, cost is important, but it's at what cost is important for sure. But it's driven by regulation, by compliances. Pharma is a good example. They won't waste money; they have to do it. The mission can be different for sure, but yeah, the priority for sure.
Yeah. My last question for you in this consulting piece is about mergers and acquisitions. Your company, MG Operations and Strategy, advises on mergers and acquisitions, operations due diligence, post-deal operations, integrations. You also work as a senior mergers and acquisitions advisor for E78, and you worked in Ernst & Young's mergers and acquisitions operations advisory business. So I want to learn more about how you actually assess a company. What are the metrics you evaluate to develop a picture of operational health in a company? And what do those metrics?
I mean, you have quantitative measures, indicators, what you call them, and they're qualitative indicators, right? So quantitative, you always look at inventory turnovers, which is very important. It shows the health of your working capital, how fast or how slow it is across years. It's very important. I look at stuff like forecast accuracy, which shows how their accuracy is compared to others and how forecast accuracy is aligned with the business plan to sell and what's impeding it and where's the bias coming from, all of that. It's a very important indicator for me and for companies to look into as well. On time in full for sure is another one. Then you look into supply concentration. When you look at sourcing risk, on the manufacturing side, you can look at their OEE, their downtime, to sort of get a good feel for their production stability and utilization for sure. On the financial side, you look at the cash life cycle, right? So you look at your DSO, you look at your working capital. All of those shows a lot of alignment with finance in terms of how operation is really aligned with finance goals from a profitability standpoint and growth standpoint. But then more than metrics, it's the governance. When you look at go to a new acquired company from a supply chain perspective, I'm very keen on looking into their season operation planning or IBP, integrated business planning process.
Mhm.
Do they have a process? For me, it does demand side, sales, marketing. Are they aligned with operations or not? And are they aligned with finance? Are they aligned with the margins and the goals? Are they aligned with the business units as well? Do they understand the goals, and is the business okay with those margins, with this productivity, with those sales allocations to specific customers? These are all important. Do they have the right key performance indicators, KPIs, to drive those decisions, or are they just reporting it? How agile is their response to disruption is one of the things I look into. Companies might have the process in there, but they're using it for reporting, not decision making. So this is one of the important things that I look for to sort of sense the disconnect between departments or the alignments. And this is where the value proposition or value creation lies in
Mhm.
post acquisition, is in terms of how do you really find those red flags? How do you really find those opportunities? How do you develop those synergies? This is all part of what I do and what I look into from a quantitative and qualitative aspect when I go there. It starts early on when you do the due diligence for sure.
Mhm.
But the value also is how do you realize the synergies, not forget about them, how to activate them. When a company comes in, private equity comes in and buy a company, they list a lot of synergies, financial ones, the functional financial, sure, but treatments as well. How do you really activate them, have a 100-day plan, make
Mhm.
sure that this actually happening. And when we're with private equities, they can focus on multiple industries, but the way they handle those projects, the speed, the focus on the value creation requires you to move faster. So there's a lot of aspects that you look into when you get in there, develop and look at those metrics for sure, evaluate them.
Yeah, something that you said it reminded me of sort of this supply chain orchestration, making sure that the data you have
Position.
coming in from one function is not only being preserved and built up here, but it's feeding into how the rest of the business operates. And we're looking towards this kind of infinity loop or a circle. Data should be feeding each other function as opposed to being preserved and
Yes.
used as a reporting tool for this one particular area. So we're looking at supply chain orchestration, maybe coordination of the company, the different functions. And is that something you find is often not there?
It's always there. It's not like people are not talking to each other, right? And
Mm.
organizations, and as they mature, they definitely have policies, they have process documented, systems, all of that. But it's more about at what level they are touched and orchestrate, which is part of this core model. Are there business rules around this? Do we have business rules about how to align supply with demand? How do we do exceptions? How do we segment our clients? How our cost to serve has to be measured across different client segments. The decision right is also different. So the cross organization. So how do you we make sure that the structure is intact in terms of who does what, especially around system implementations? Those decision rights change. Some of them are automated, some of them are by exception. So how do you look into those kind of governance aspect and look at the strategy, the business rules, and sustainability agenda, how to bring all of this together? There's always an element you can touch on, create value out of it, and quantify the value that what the organization is driven by. Yeah, and especially when you integrate two companies, one company can have it, other company doesn't have it. So
Mhm.
integration is key. How do you realize the benefits of that, integration? Which process trumps which one? So which business rules are we going to use? Which ones
Mhm.
make sense for now the combined business unit, for example? So This is mainly what you focus on. It's not just about coming in and saying you do it wrong. No, it's how you can do it better or how you do it under the your operating model that you focus on.
I want to jump into the last section of this episode, just building your personal brand and the value of networking. So I know when we were first talking about what kind of advice you wanted to impart onto us and the students, you talked about building a personal brand. And I think it's really important. I think I have a character that I try to bring to the table. I try to be as authentic as I can. How would you define a personal brand? What is a personal brand? And do you have any insight into the difference in career trajectory between someone who operates with a personal brand and someone who doesn't?
That's a great question, actually. Personal brand is very important, not just as a consultant or a supply chain professional. It's very important in a career to have a brand. It's about your values, right? And if you want to focus on supply chain or consulting, it's how you realize or what is it that you know, but also how consistent perception people have for your values, your character, your impact is what's important, even if you're not in the room, right? So it's not about your LinkedIn bio or your logo. It's about how people remember you coming out from the meeting and providing some clarity and some chaos. For me, it's how do I do supply chain transformation under pressure, right? How you can work with the boardroom, with the C-levels, but then work with the plant floor level, which is very important. How you translate that business strategy, principles, and goal to the supply chain strategy. This is very important in terms of my branding and in terms of how I differentiate myself. It's what attracts opportunities to you. It's what makes you stronger when you develop your partnerships with others, how you get invited to high trusted conversations as well. It's very important. You always have to be known to something you have to have a brand that would help you also steer your career, right? You don't want to be a reactive. You want to be known for what values you are and what impact you can bring to the table is what's important about your personal brand.
It's interesting you said it's also about how you show up when you're not in the room, but also can you talk to people at every level? I know I was working in the warehouse. I felt there was a disconnect between how the managers were talking to me and the truck drivers and operators' perception of their managers. There wasn't a level of authenticity. Being a trusted voice during a tense situation is definitely a big part of it. It brings consistency to who you are as well, I think.
You're a great example of being a communicator and develop a personal brand, right? I'm proud of you and I really admire you for what you're doing for your student chapters, how you're communicating and networking outside with the industry, how you're bringing that together. I'm sure, throughout your journey for 5 years, you learned a lot about how to bring that language and translate that language across different bodies. I admire that. That's a
I
good
appreciate
example.
that. Thank you. This is a good segue. I wanted to know what actions or experiences in your life revealed to you who you were, and how did you go about staying true to your own character and leverage that personal brand despite working with different companies and different industries whose values may fundamentally differ from one.
I mean, your values are your values, right? I mean, you're never gonna change your values because of different cultures or organization cultures, right? So you definitely know what is it that drives you and how you want to succeed. For me, I know I'm connected. I'm a leader. It's about how I develop that new system and be able to talk to the operation side, technology side. For me, it was about how do I focus on bringing in value across different stakeholders. Companies I work with are definitely ethical, no doubt. What's important is how you maintain the rigor of, working with others is one thing. How you develop relationships for sure is important. And then how you keep your values is important because it's part of your personal brand.
This is a conversation I have with a lot of students. The most given advice, both from Career Management Center and from people who have worked, is you have to network. You have to learn how to network and be good at networking. what students think networking is and how it's actually practiced are two different things. One very common story I get told is I don't want to be seen as somebody who is talking to somebody with an ulterior motive, that I'm only speaking to you because I want it to be a stepping stone. It feels less authentic. In your networking career or in your consulting career, networking is not only a part of getting more of the business actually selling the consulting services, but it's also a part of bringing together the board and the executive suite with the operators of the company. And for me personally, networking is not only about getting new roles, but actually succeeding within the roles itself. So I wanted to know your opinion. What do you think is the disconnect between people's perception of what networking is and what it can provide versus how it's actually practiced by the masters of the industry?
Interesting question. So disconnect is how people reach out and how they view the network. It's not about what they can do for you all the time.
Mhm.
It's actually what you can do for them before you even ask what they can do for you that actually makes a bit different.
Mhm.
So it depends on your credit with people and that they know when you reach out because you need to reach out that they owe you also a response. So it's not transactional. It's more about how you build that relationship before you even need them. So it's about giving, it's about sharing ideas, it's about making introductions to others, helping others succeed. This is key to understand and building relationship for sure. The other thing, you're good at your network. It's not the number of people, I would say,
Yeah.
it's the quality of the people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all about how you develop that ecosystem of network that share the same values. That's important. The ROI from those relationships is not just a new job, the insight, it's the early deal flow, it's the mentorship, the collaboration. A lot of my client wins came from all pitches because the conversation made sense to them. And when they come back, they come back at months or years. I had a client who I did a project for him, gosh, 2015 or something. And he reached out to me and he was telling me, you're the one who gave me that idea about something has to do with demand. And I remembered you and I wanted to talk to you about how we can help my new employer. The credibility that you built with your network, follow up and everything. I have many examples of working with people, their mentors, and they came for me when I needed them a long time ago. And I was keen on continuing and having that relationship regardless of any benefit. It's about how I cultivated that relationship. And it meant a lot to me. I did not really tie it to anything, but to make sure that I'm around them because I know they're successful and what they're known for, and they would come around. So it's very important for me to continue to develop that network. It's not just transactional. I even tell my sons the same thing. My son is in college right now and he joined a fraternity. One of the important things that I always told him about is how good the fraternity, know the right people, make sure that you made the right decision of who you hang out with and what projects you work on, because this is going to stick for long. They're going to remember you in college and what you did and what value you brought in and what you made of. It's your core that's going to matter to them, regardless of which direction you're going to go with the industry or you go to whatever. They're going to remember you for your core. That's important. Same thing, a 10-year-old. I'm keen on knowing who's his friend because it really matters. It's going to matter in terms of how he going to shape his interests, sport, non-sport. I have friends who go back when we were very young. It's basically, they stay or now, but you would think that you want to build a relationship from that long time ago because those are the ones that know where you come from, what background you come from, and what you made of, and your true self, your true persona. So you definitely want to maintain those relations, the right ones for sure. Value the network and use it very strategically.
I think to your point, I grew up, went to an international school. When I first came to the United States, I didn't realize how large schools were. My graduating
Yeah.
class was 180 people,
Okay.
right? The entire school was just 2,000 students, but over here, one graduating class is 2,000 people. And for me, at least the people that I met 15 years ago, I remember them so clearly, all the people that I was around, because I had
Yeah.
so much more of an intimate relationship with them. I remember all the conversations that we had. Just a few
Yeah.
weeks ago, the very first person I met in Doha ended up moving to Dallas, where I live over here. We had reconnected, and it's because I remember the kind of person he was, how he introduced me into the country, into the school was so important. Picking your friends carefully is definitely something I also tell my own family, but it's also something I've come to know living in an international environment. It might not be something that's seen over here when you have access to hundreds of millions of people, but for me,
Yeah.
coming from a relatively small area, the impact of those relationships was so large. So I think that's how I structure my networking as well. I'm very conscious of making sure I present myself as a good person, not for any other reason other than the fact that they will remember me. Our interactions are important. Being genuine and genuinely interested in what the other person has to offer and what they have to
Oh yeah.
say is how that relationship, it doesn't feel transactional to me. I feel like every person I meet was something valuable. I learned a story or I gained a perspective, and it doesn't feel transactional in nature. I can understand it in a business school when the biggest advice that you're given is to go and network to look for your next opportunity. It can come off as something that's transactional, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be.
Has to be
Yeah.
natural. I mean, it can be for a lot of people, like for you, it's a gift how to connect with people, how to come across, you reach out, what, so LinkedIn, but it's the way for our network, the ASCM network for sure. But it's how do you really give and take? They asked me if we can do this, which I appreciate a lot, and hopefully it will be of value. It's how you really come across that's very important. Network is important. I don't care what business you are, whether supply chain consulting, but it's what people remember you and have build the right connections, but also build their own connections and or failed on some networks, no doubt. Network fail me, but you learn and come to the conclusion that you have to present yourself in the right way. The personal brand that we were talking about,
Yeah.
that's important. Your values, same thing. You're known for this and that. So you're serious in what you do. You have a passion for something. It sticks with you. And that's what people want to do business with, right?
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming
Or,
up on time, so I really
yeah.
want to say thank you for teaching us about the consulting world, supply chain consulting, and reinforcing the importance of authenticity and being a genuine person, bringing your personal values into the work that you do. I think this is a very important lesson for everybody. I know for some reason, UT Dallas students, at least in my experience, a lot of them want to jump into consulting, and supply chain consulting is
Right.
one of those areas that people really love. So I really appreciate the perspective. And thank you for joining us on the Fulfillment Files.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And you're amazing. Like what you do. Those podcasts are amazing. I love it. And good
Thank
luck
you.
on your stats and your journey. Congrats on graduating. And I'm excited for your new prospects. I'm not going to share a video for sure, but I'm very excited for you. Well done.
Thank you.